We return now to Masterpiece Theater. Oh, hello. I didn't see you there. Welcome back to another edition of Masterpiece Theater. Those albums that have reached the critical acclaim that it so rightly deserves, essentially putting itself on that pantheon of untouchable masterpieces. Or those albums that are the diamond in the rough, those ones that are the overlooked gem from such a very large portion of music. And for most of them, I've been kind of keeping my eye on those diamonds in the rough. And this is a particular piece that I listen to on those rainier days. And in the past couple of days here in Toronto, Canada, it's been quite rainy despite the fact that it's the middle of February. So I've been listening to this guy quite a bit and revisiting it and realizing just how much I enjoy it. Let's dive in. The Gathering Light by Karnataka. So Karnataka is one of those bands that really followed suit with, say, mostly Autumn. They sought to blend that Celtic influence within more of a progressive rock, like, say, Jethro Tull or some of the Canterbury scenes, most notably probably Renaissance, but it was mostly Autumn that really trailblazed for these guys. Now, a little bit of context before I dive into the music here. The Gathering Light, for me, was released right at the perfect time. I was between my undergraduate and my master's degree within my schooling. A buddy and I decided to do a road trip around the Maritime provinces here in Canada, and we found ourselves spending 2 or 3 days in Cape Breton. And while I was visiting Cape Breton, I dove into this album hard, and it was the perfect setting for this album. The Gathering Light is definitely a very Celtic feeling album. They're using a lot of those fife type of sounds, like almost like the bagpipes without the big bagpipey sound, and it uses a lot of those harmonizations within the vocals. The lead singer of Lisa Fury really captures that Celtic vocals. Her ability to harmonize with the overall music, especially the grounding music in here, is next to none, and it really paints a picture of, like, say, that Celtic atmosphere within it, which, again, perfect background music to the setting of Cape Breton. It opens up beautifully within The Calling, which is just a very beautiful morning sunrise within a foggy, misty dew of a morning scene within, like, the Highlands. And then The Calling goes straight into State of Grace, and both of these are instrumental pieces, which really set the foundation for this album. State of Grace takes where The Calling had come from, and then just kind of blown that mist away and showed us the Highlands. It hits you really, really hard because we've had a lot of the foundations. It's really taken its time to really hunker down and say, like, the rock plateaus, and then on that we have the green and luscious fields. We're entered into a whole bunch of arpeggios, the notes going up and down very quickly, and it's blending with one another. We get into that main synthesizer and that main keyboard, and what I love about this is just how optimistic and how pleasant the sounds are. And what I love is how it shifts from one motif to another. Like, it shifts very rapidly, and it's really in that midpoint where we go from, like, that kind of the chorus of the song, and it ushers us right into this other part. And the transition is a little jarring at first, but once we come into the next transitional period, it feels natural and it feels very rhythmic. So after State of Grace, we come into Your World, and this one's a little bit more of a funky track. This is less of, like, say, the Grey Highlands or that Celtic mystique, and this is much more of like a rocking approach. And it's the first time we hear vocals and lyrics on the album. I love that we finally have some guitar works that's really forefront and center, and it really plays around with where the atmosphere is going at this point. Near the end, like, it's a conglomeration of everything. They've introduced little pieces here and there throughout the song, and then the ending is the unification of all those, and it does a great job of closing the track. A Moment in Time is the fourth track, and it's the midpoint on this album, and it does a really great job. And that it's the first one that we see a little bit of darkness. Like, it doesn't stay in the darkness for very long, but it's the first time that we do feel a little bit of the darkness creeping in. And it's probably the most intimate song on the album as well. This is definitely where Lisa is really taking the forefront here. It's like a conversation between her and the audience within this. The musicians are a little bit more pared down, they're a little bit more in the background, and this allows for the atmosphere of the song to really shine through. So I did a quick Google search. Julian pipes, that's what they're called. They're not called a fife. Anyway, within the fourth track, that's where these guys are really prominent and really at the forefront here. And I love that stretch within the midpoint of this song where they're used. They blend very well with like overall atmosphere of the album, and that's where it really hunkers down within that Celtic scene. And it just drips with beauty. So, The Serpent and the Sea is a fantastic song. This is the fifth track on here, and I love that it takes like a good minute before anything happens on this track, and it really like paints that picture of the serpent in the sea, because you're on the sea, you're looking and you're waiting, and then all of a sudden it appears, and it's got such that same kind of like presentation within the State of Grace, where it just hits you right off the get-go, and it really is a dance between the musicians and Lisa on the vocals there. And oh man, that guitar work near the midpoint of this track, it's just and I love how they didn't just like slow the song down and gave him space. He had to come in and play within his own little atmosphere there, and the fact that he then used that energy to push the song forward. And then we come into Forsaken. And Forsaken is much like A Moment in Time in that it takes the first stretch of the song in really laying out the foundation. And much like Serpent in the Sea, it doesn't really hit you until like the 2-minute mark. And I like that they took its time just as more of a reflective moment, a somber moment. And then once we finally get into the actual meat and potatoes of the song, that's where we get more of that optimistic and more of that fun presentation of it. Now, Tide to Fall is one of the shorter pieces on this track, and it's probably like the shortest actual song. Like, The Calling is much more of an opening track. It doesn't wander quite as much. It's much more concise within its presentation, and it's definitely much more of a darker track, which I think we needed with this to kind of contrast the final track of the Gathering Light. It does play around with the balancing of the light and the dark a little bit better than some of the other tracks, which meander a little bit more. Finally, we come into the title track, The Gathering Light, the big epic, the 14.5-minute song. This guy I love. Like, this is the moment we've been waiting for. And waiting in the fact that, like, the rest of the songs that have led up to this point have been fantastic and have just been, like, gushing with beauty. But this is the one that I just can't help but love. It takes its time to build, and it isn't until, say, like, the 3-minute mark that this song really gets going. Once we finally do get in, it's not just that big blasting down the doors as we had within, say, like the State of Grace or the Serpent and the Sea. This one, it just kind of slowly clears away, and you just have Lisa kind of singing away there. And it's what builds the song on that foundation, and it's a slow build, and it's an earned build as well. And then once we get to the end point, it like slows down, it chills out for a little bit. It's a much more of an intimate moment, as I've mentioned, and then it just plays you out within that gathering light, and it just makes me melt. And so overall, The Gathering Light is a fantastic celebration of that Celtic music. I continuously revisit this album time and time again, A, to recapture that moment that I had with my buddy out in Cape Breton, but B, because the music is just so joyful and so welcoming that it's like visiting that relative that you always smile and always have a great time with. And it's really for that reason that I have to say The Gathering Light by Karnataka is a full-on masterpiece. So that's my thoughts about it. What are yours? Have a spin. I'll leave a link to the album either on Spotify or YouTube down below in the comments. But let me know of your own thoughts about this album once you've had a spin by commenting down below. Thank you guys so much for watching. As always, you guys are definitely the best. And until next time, notes out.